Established in 1872, Yellowstone National Park was America's first national park. Yellowstone covers a high, mountain-girt plateau lying astride the crest of the Rocky Mountains in the northwest corner of Wyoming. It is an area of such natural beauty and unusual features that Wonderland has long been its fitting sobriquet. There, within an area larger than the states of Delaware and Rhode Island combined, are superlatives of scenery, geology, and wildlife in a grandly primeval setting, a fitting location for America's first, largest, and most influential national park. The Yellowstone Plateau is characterized by its relatively flat, undulating topography and its paucity of high mountains. The Rocky Mountains is a continuous chain of mountains that rise to peaks of some 3,000 meters or more in height. In Yellowstone, the plateau exists in part because the entire region bulged upward over the past few million years, as this part of North America moved over the Yellowstone Hotspot, a rising plume of hot and molten rock within the Earth's mantle and crust. During the past 2 million years, the hotspot generated 3 incredibly large eruptions that blew huge craters in the ground. These giant volcanic craters, known as calderas, erupted on a scale unknown in modern time. Huge amounts of molten rock exploded skyward, destroying mountain ranges, incinerating anything within dozens of miles, and dumping volcanic ash over half of North America. Much of central Yellowstone National Park, including much of Yellowstone Lake, sits within the 72 by 48 kilometer caldera, created by the last big blast about 630,000 years ago. Yellowstone sits to the west of the seismic belt, a region known as the Basin and Range Province, an area of the interior western United States that is being stretched apart. This stretching is responsible for creating the Teton, Wasatch, Hebgen Lake, and other powerful faults within the intermountain seismic belt. Most often the earthquakes caused by these faults are small to moderate, but some have numbered among the strongest in U.S. history. Although its geothermal features are the primary draw for visitors to Yellowstone National Park, Yellowstone's rivers, lakes, and magnificent waterfalls undoubtedly create a lasting impression. Firehole River is one of Yellowstone Park's best-known rivers. The Firehole begins in tiny Madison Lake, which lies in a marshy subalpine basin. With half of the Earth's geothermal features, Yellowstone holds the planet's most diverse and intact collection of geysers, hot springs, mud pots, and fumaroles. This bedrock bottom is evident in the Firehole throughout its length. Boulders broken off the cliffs of Firehole Canyon and strewn along the river bottom make it appear different from the rest of the stream, but if you are interested enough to move some of the boulders, you will find them resting on bedrock. The Firehole, in spite of its late temperature tribulations, is still a magnificent trout stream, as challenging as it always has been. It is as beautiful as it is unique. The hot springs, geysers, and other thermal features that cause its temperature problems also make it rich in minerals, which greatly benefits the creatures who have made it their home. The river was allegedly named by legendary trapper and guide Jim Bridger in 1851 when he was showing a group of mountain men from the southern Rockies through the park. The Gibbon River begins its short journey into the Madison in the center of Yellowstone National Park at Grebe Lake. From there, it flows for a short distance into Wolf Lake. Upon its exit from Wolf Lake, the Gibbon River twists and turns through narrow canyons and great meadows and thermal areas, until joining with the Firehole River for the genies of the Madison River. The Gibbon River was named for Army officer Colonel John Gibbon, who explored the area with a detachment of soldiers in 1872. When Yellowstone became a national park, almost 40% of Yellowstone's waters were naturally barren of fish, including Shoshone Lake, Lewis Lake, and the Firehole River above Firehole Falls. Early park managers thought it necessary to plant fish into new locations, produce more fish in hatcheries, and introduce non-native species. By the mid-20th century, more than 310 million fish had been stocked in Yellowstone. After it was realized that many of these activities were harmful to the park, stocking of fishes in the park ended in 1956. Yellowstone National Park has managed to protect its cultural and natural resources, as well as its outstanding scenery. Gibbon Falls is located on the Gibbon River about midway between Norris Geyser Basin and Madison Junction. The falls are situated where the Gibbon River falls off the northern escarpment into the Yellowstone caldera. William Henry Jackson and John Merle Coulter of the Second Hayden Survey discovered this waterfall in the Gibbon River, over 25 meters in height, in 1872. Its name, taken from the river, seems to have come into general usage quite early. Some early park maps, however, used the name First Canyon Falls. The Yellowstone River, the longest undammed river in the contiguous United States, retains much of its natural habitat characteristics. This stream was named by the Indians a century or more before Europeans came into the area. La Vérendrye was the first white man to discover the river when he reached the area of the Mandan villages in 1743. David Thompson of the Northwest Company is credited with the first writing of the name in English in 1798. The Yellowstone River is considered to be one of the world's great trout streams and is officially classed as a blue ribbon stream that flows from the park in Montana to its confluence with the Boulder River east of Livingston, and from the mouth of the Rosebud Creek near Rosebud, Montana, to the North Dakota border. Yellowstone Falls is composed of two separate falls, the Lower and the Upper Falls. The Upper Falls of the Yellowstone River, which is 33 meters high, is a further upstream of Yellowstone's two most famous waterfalls. Jim Bridger himself was familiar with this falls. Old-timer James Gemmell has stated that in 1846 he and Bridger visited it. A great number and variety of plants and wild animals make Yellowstone their home. The lodgepole pine, the park's most common tree, soars tall and straight, reaching up to 23 meters in height. Some American Indians used it to make frames for their teepees or lodges, hence the name. Growing in thick groves, only the tree's tops have branches. Those trees that stand alone often have lower branches because sunlight can reach their entire length. Engelmann spruce and subalpine fir thrive in areas that are rich in volcanic soil, although the lodgepole pine monopolizes more than 80% of Yellowstone's forests. The Wyoming paintbrush is one of more than 200 species of Indian paintbrush found in North America. The yellow monkey flower thrives in wet areas, such as the channel runoffs near hydrothermal features. The shape of the flower's blossom resembles a monkey's face. The Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River is a focal feature of this region, and numerous trails follow its rim, descend its walls, or lead to the brinks of its waterfalls. The lower falls of the Yellowstone River, long believed to be the park's tallest at 94 meters, is also one of the great waterfalls of the North American continent. It has probably had more words written about it than any other waterfall in the park. The river has carved a canyon 250 to 400 meters deep, 460 to 1,200 meters wide, and 32 kilometers long. Rhyolite, the rock which forms the canyon walls, underwent alteration when thermal water worked its way up. This weakened the rhyolite and made it susceptible to erosion. The yellow-hued rocks lining the canyon walls may seem appropriate for the name Yellowstone, but the canyon did not give the park its name. Instead, the name was derived from the yellow-banded bluffs along the river, several hundred miles north, near the confluence with the Missouri River. During their wanderings, the early French-Canadian trappers learned the name Mitseadoifor, the Yellowstone River, from the Indians who inhabited the area, and this in French became Roche Jaune, or Pierre Jaune, meaning yellow rock or yellow stone. Hot acidic water and steam altered the characteristics of the volcanic rock in this area, making it softer and vulnerable to erosion and affecting its color. The canyon is basically a geyser basin eroded by a river. The upper 11 kilometers of the canyon lay within the confines of the crater formed by the Great Catastrophic Eruption. The striking yellow, orange, red, brown, and white colors of the canyon are the result of chemical alterations caused by subterranean heat, together with minerals and iron oxides. One of the most exceptional features of the park is Yellowstone Lake, located in the central portion of the park. Yellowstone Lake is extremely large, covering 220 square kilometers. It is in fact the largest lake in the world, at its elevation of 2,357 meters, and one of the largest 100 lakes anywhere. It is so large that the lake even creates its own weather system. The lake also contains 7 named islands. The lake fills part of the caldera which resulted from the catastrophic eruption, filling in the basin in the southeast part of the caldera, between the caldera's east rim and rhyolite flows on the west. Calderas are large basin-shaped volcanic depressions more or less circular in form. Caldera eruptions on the scale that occurred at Yellowstone have a worldwide frequency of perhaps 1 every 100,000 years. Somewhat smaller eruptions on the scale of Crater Lake Mount Mazama in Oregon are more frequent, perhaps every 1,000 years or less. Such explosive eruptions are not isolated events. Rather, they were climatic stages of magmatic processes that extended over hundreds of thousands of years. No one has ever seen a volcanic explosion on the scale of the Yellowstone eruptions, but smaller explosions have been observed and their activity described. The magma chamber beneath this part of Yellowstone continues to cause the caldera floor to rise 2.5 centimeters per year, and may on occasion trigger earthquakes. The water in the lake is very cold and clear. The water at the bottom of the lake remains a chilly 5 degrees Celsius year-round. However, explorations of the lake bottom have revealed vents spouting boiling water and deep fissures. 13 species of fish are native to Yellowstone's lakes and streams. Native sport fish include 3 subspecies of cutthroat trout, fluvial Arctic grayling, and mountain whitefish. Non-native fish species that were introduced to the park in the late 19th and early 20th centuries include rainbow trout, brown trout, brook trout, and lake trout. Although non-native trout are also an important part of the angler's experience in Yellowstone, they have contributed to a decline in the park's native cutthroat trout and fluvial Arctic grayling, especially in recent years. Geysers seem to sprout all over the park. A geyser is a hot spring with an intriguing habit of tossing underground water into the air. Geysers form when water falling as rain or snow seeps through porous layers of rock. That water eventually comes into contact with extremely hot underground rocks that have been heated by a large body of molten material, called magma. This hot water then rises through a series of cracks and fissures underneath the Earth's surface. In a sense, these fissures are the plumbing system of a thermal feature. A geyser is the equivalent of a giant pressure cooker. Even though the temperature of the water deep down may well be above boiling, the weight and pressure of the water above prevents that boiling from occurring. Eventually, though, the pressure builds enough to push the water in the upper reaches up and out, causing an overflow. That overflow in turn relieves the pressure on the superheated water below, causing it to flash into steam. That flash, an explosion through a narrow constricted place in the rocks, is what sends water shooting into the air. The Upper Geyser Basin, approximately 3.2 square kilometers in area, contains the largest concentration and nearly 1/4 of all of the geysers in the world. A variety of thermal features exist here: spouting geysers, colorful hot springs, and steaming fumaroles. It erupts approximately once every 45 to 90 minutes, depending on the duration of the previous eruption. The park is comprised primarily of high forested volcanic plateaus that have been eroded over the millennia by glaciation and streamflow. The plateaus are flanked on the north, east, and south by mountains. Lamar Valley is located in the northeast section of the park, between Tower Junction and the northeast entrance, near Cook City. Yellowstone National Park is like no other place on Earth. The largest concentration of geysers in the world, a spectacular array of free-roaming wildlife, and a collection of rare and unique plant species are all protected here. In looking for wildflowers and plants, it is important to keep in mind that elevation, relative temperatures, soil types, and precipitation patterns all play a role in what it is possible to find blooming in various areas at different times of the year. In addition, far-reaching events such as wildland fires can cause spectacular blooms of species that thrive on the conditions these events create. Fire behavior is dependent on many different environmental factors, including vegetation. Because plant communities reflect complex interactions of biological and physical factors, such as seral stage, soils, moisture, temperature, slope, aspect, and elevation, plants are good indicators of potential fuel combustibility and fire behavior. Many of Yellowstone's plant species have adapted to fire. The Lamar River, a tributary of the Yellowstone River, flows for approximately 48 kilometers. Flowing through the equally beautiful Lamar Valley, the river provides one of the park's best opportunities for fishing. Due to the fact that the Lamar River is primarily supplied by the runoff of mountain snows, it is not uncommon for it to remain high and murky in July, well past the time other rivers are clear. The history of human activity in the vast Yellowstone region dates back over 11,000 years. How far back has yet to be determined, but their presence probably coincided with the end of the last period of ice coverage, approximately 14,000 years ago. Human occupation of the greater Yellowstone area seems to follow environmental changes of the last 15,000 years. Glaciers once covered most of what is now Yellowstone Park. They receded and left behind rivers and valleys that people most likely followed in pursuit of Ice Age mammals, such as the mammoth and the giant bison. The first people arrived in this region over 11,000 years ago. Archaeologists have found little physical evidence of their presence, other than distinctive stone tools and projectile points. From these artifacts, scientists surmise that they hunted mammals and ate berries, seeds, and roots. As the climate in the Yellowstone region became warmer and drier, the animals, vegetation, and human lifestyles also changed. Large Ice Age animals that were adapted to cold and wet conditions became extinct. No longer able to rely on large mammals for food, humans began to depend on smaller animals, such as deer and bighorn sheep. The genetic purity of Yellowstone Lake cutthroat trout makes them extremely valuable. However, the population has been exposed to non-native lake trout. In the mid-1980s, lake trout were moved illegally from Lewis Lake to Yellowstone Lake, where they consumed native cutthroat trout. The declining number of cutthroat trout that return to Yellowstone Lake tributaries to spawn in the spring suggests that cutthroat trout populations in the lake have declined to an extremely low level. Lewis Falls is a 9-meter-high drop of the Lewis River, about 1.6 kilometers downstream from Lewis Lake. The area was explored in 1872 by the Hayden Survey. Due to its location above a highway bridge crossing of the Lewis River, Lewis Falls is one of the park's most photographed waterfalls. It is easily seen from one's car window when driving the South Entrance Road, and there is a pullout and parking area nearby. The Lewis River begins at the southern end of Shoshone Lake and flows southerly approximately 4.8 kilometers to Lewis Lake. This river drains Shoshone and Lewis Lakes and is a tributary of the Snake River. In 1872, members of the Second Hayden Survey called the river Lake Fork because it was a fork of the Snake that began in those two lakes. An 1876 map showed the river marked Lewis Fork of the Snake, named after Lewis Lake. The contrast between the seasons is evident in the park. The arrival of spring may signal warm weather in many parts of America, but in Yellowstone, be prepared for snow. Cold temperatures and snowstorms are frequent guests into April and May, and late spring snowstorms have often dumped more than a foot of snow in just 24 hours. Summer undeniably provides the park's most comfortable temperatures, with nearly non-existent humidity. Since Yellowstone never truly experiences extreme heat, summer visitors are treated to July daytime highs, typically around 25 degrees Celsius, with lower elevations sometimes hitting temperatures around 30 degrees Celsius. Arriving early, autumn weather in Yellowstone can be just as pleasant as summer. In mid-autumn, visitors can expect daytime average temperatures of 5 to 20 degrees Celsius, with overnight lows in the teens and single digits. As the season progresses, snowstorms occur more frequently and increase in intensity as winter draws near. Sudden storms during late autumn are practically a certainty. Winter is by far Yellowstone's longest and coldest season, but visitors should still be able to enjoy the park's beauty with careful planning. Daytime temperatures often hover in the single digits, but on occasion may climb to 5 degrees Celsius. Frigid nighttime readings dip well below zero. The coldest temperature ever recorded was minus 54 degrees Celsius on February 9, 1933, near the park's west entrance. Lewis Lake is the third largest lake in Yellowstone National Park. Like Shoshone Lake, Lewis Lake fills basins formed between adjacent flows of lava from a volcanic eruption. The Madison River is formed at the junction of the Gibbon and Firehole Rivers, hence the name Madison Junction. The Madison joins the Jefferson and the Gallatin Rivers at Three Forks, Montana, to form the Missouri River. The Madison is a blue ribbon fly fishing stream with healthy stocks of brown and rainbow trout and mountain whitefish. Yellowstone has 13 fish native to its lakes and streams. Native sport fish include 3 subspecies of cutthroat trout, fluvial Arctic grayling, and mountain whitefish. Non-native fish species that were introduced to the park in the late 19th and early 20th centuries include rainbow trout, brown trout, brook trout, and lake trout. Although non-native trout species are also important to the angler's experience in Yellowstone, they have contributed to a decline in the park's native cutthroat trout and fluvial Arctic grayling, especially recently. The ranges and densities of the park's 11 native fish species have been substantially altered during the past century due to exploitation, introduction of non-native and exotic species, and natural factors. Despite changes in species composition and distribution, large-scale habitat degradation, such as water diversions or water pollution, has not occurred in the park. Native cutthroat trout are the most ecologically important fish of the park and the most highly regarded by visiting anglers. Non-native rainbow trout compete with the native cutthroat trout for food and habitat resources, and even worse, interbreed with native fish, producing hybrids. Once this occurs, the cutthroat population is forever damaged and cannot be restored without immense expense and a complete removal of the entire fish community from the stream. To reduce the level of hybridization in the park's cutthroat trout waters, anglers are encouraged to harvest rainbow trout. Largely due to these activities and the popularity of Yellowstone's fisheries, recreational angling became a long-term, accepted activity in national parks throughout the country. In Yellowstone, fisheries management, as the term is understood today, began with the U.S. Army and was assumed by the National Park Service in 1916. Fish stocking, data gathering, and other monitoring activities began with the U.S. Fish Commission in 1889 and were continued by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service until 1996. Since then, they have been the responsibility of the National Park Service. Because of the increasing number of anglers in the park, more restrictive regulations have been adopted in Yellowstone. These restrictions include season opening and closing dates, restrictive use of bait, catch and release only for native fish, as well as number and size limits for non-native species. Some waters are closed to fishing to protect threatened and endangered species, sensitive nesting birds, and to provide scenic viewing areas for visitors seeking undisturbed wildlife. In Yellowstone, bald eagles, ospreys, pelicans, otters, grizzly bears, and other wildlife take precedence over humans in utilizing fish as food. Midway Geyser Basin contains a small collection of mammoth-sized springs. Midway is part of the Lower Geyser Basin, but because of its isolated location between the main features of Lower and Upper Geyser Basins, it became known as Midway. Rudyard Kipling, who visited Yellowstone in 1889, immortalized this basin by referring to it as Hell's Half-Acre. It is remembered by that name to this day. Despite its small size, Midway possesses two of the largest hot springs in the world. Grand Prismatic Spring, nearly 113 meters in diameter, sits upon a large mound surrounded by small step-like terraces. Yellowstone's abundant and diverse wildlife is as famous as its geysers. Habitat preferences and seasonal cycles of movement determine, in a general sense, where a particular animal may be at a particular time. Near its thermal basins, Yellowstone National Park has the largest concentration of wildlife in the lower 48 states. There are over 400 moose in Yellowstone, though their numbers have declined over the past 40 years due to drought, predation, loss of habitat, and other factors. Moose are the largest member of the deer family and can be found in the marshy areas of the park, including lake shores and along rivers. Calves are born in the spring and remain with the cow for a year. Cow moose will aggressively protect their young from any perceived threat. Unlike elk, moose are solitary and can live up to 20 years in Yellowstone. Their favorite food is willows and aquatic vegetation. Black bears are the most numerous member of the bear family in North America and are found from the Pacific to the Atlantic coast. An estimated 500 to 600 black bears have made Yellowstone National Park their home. Grizzly bears are identified by the large hump above their shoulders. Their rump is also lower than their shoulders. They are larger than the black bear and have a slightly upturned nose. The story of the Yellowstone bison, one of America's most majestic animals, covers more than 100 years of struggle and conflict. In the early 1800s, an estimated 65 million bison roamed the continent of North America. However, market hunting and poaching had a devastating effect on the bison population, and by 1890, fewer than 1,000 specimens remained. The bison, often referred to as buffalo, is truly a magnificent animal. An adult bull bison may be 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weigh up to 900 kilograms. Females look like the males except that they are smaller and have more slender horns. Bison mate from July through early August, and the calves are born in April and May. During the spring and early summer, newborn calves can often be viewed in the Firehole area and Lamar Valley. As a result of a lawsuit filed by the state of Montana, a new bison management plan was developed. All bison entering Montana along Yellowstone's north boundary would be shot or shipped to slaughter. Ravens are often confused with American crows, but they can be distinguished in a couple of ways. Crows are generally smaller, have a more rounded fan tail, and make a light caw sound. On the main road through Yellowstone National Park between Mammoth Hot Springs and Tower Roosevelt, take a detour down an unpaved road called Blacktail Plateau Drive. Blacktail Deer Plateau is rich with wildlife, including pronghorn antelope, mule deer, elk, and bison. Mule deer, also known as black-tailed deer, are ideally suited to the rugged slopes of the Rocky Mountains. A large number inhabit the park in summer, but most migrate to lower elevations or winter range outside the park in the winter. Like elk and bison, mule deer were reduced to dangerously low numbers in the mid-19th century due to overhunting. The hills surrounding Old Faithful and the upper Geyser Basin are reminders of Quaternary rhyolitic lava flows. These flows, occurring long after the catastrophic eruption of 600,000 years ago, float across the landscape like stiff mounds of bread dough due to their high silica content. Old Faithful erupts more frequently than any of the other big geysers, although it is not the largest or most regular geyser in the park. Its average interval between eruptions is about 76 minutes, varying from 45 to 110 minutes. The Old Faithful Inn was designed by Robert C. Reamer, who wanted the asymmetry of the building to reflect the chaos of nature. The original part of the inn, known as the Old House, was completed in 1904 and includes an immense lobby with a huge stone fireplace. The rustic-style lodge, with its log and wood shingle exterior, is located adjacent to the world-famous Old Faithful Geyser. The lobby of the hotel features a 20-meter-high ceiling, a massive rhyolite fireplace, and railings made of contorted lodgepole pine. Wings were added to the hotel in 1915 and 1927, and today there are 327 rooms. The Mammoth Area exhibits much evidence of glacial activity from the Pinesdale glaciation. Ice marginal stream beds are in evidence in the small, narrow valleys where floating Phantom Lake is found. Pronghorn are found mainly in the northern section of the park. One of the best places to spot them is the one-way dirt road that runs from Mammoth Hot Spring to Gardner. About 5,000 are present in Yellowstone area today. There are also at least 50 small mammal species that have made Yellowstone National Park their home. The park is famous for its geysers, hot springs, fumaroles, mud pots, and steam vents. Fumaroles are holes or vents from which steam rushes into the air. It is like a hot spring but lacks liquid water. Either there isn't enough water or the underground rock is too hot and boils off all of the water, so a pool cannot form. The small amount of water that does seep into the area is converted to steam and expelled from the vent, oftentimes creating a hissing noise. Mud pots are thermal areas where a water-saturated sediment similar to clay is affected by superheated steam rising from below. Rising steam that has forced its way upwards through the mud and groundwater bursts upwards, sending showers of mud into the air, as if in a small explosion. Steam vents are cracks in the surface of the ground through which pressurized steam from below escapes to the surface, oftentimes with a hissing sound. Hot springs are similar to geysers, but their underground channels are large enough to allow rapid circulation of water. Rising hot water releases heat energy by evaporation or hot water runoff, while convection currents return the cooler water to the underground system, thus maintaining equilibrium. The microorganisms that live in and around the hot springs often make the pools very colorful. In Yellowstone, hot springs, pools, and runoff channels display every color of the rainbow. Bacteria and algae are mainly responsible for brightly colored runoff channels. Varying water temperatures both cause and permit differences in plant communities and intensities of color. The runoff channel from a hot spring, for example, is white or clear near its source. Only a few single-cell bacteria can survive in its boiling water. Large hot pools also radiate with brilliant colors ranging from deep blue to emerald green. These waters reflect the blue color rays present in sunlight and absorb the remainder of the color spectrum. A blue hot pool changes its mood from day to day, depending on the intensity of light or the amount of particulate matter suspended in the water. Fine particles of silica or clay suspended in the water produce a baby blue colored pool. A blue thermal pool lined with yellow sulfur or yellow bacteria produces hues of green, forming emerald colored pools. Yellowstone is home to more than 1,350 species of vascular plants, of which 218 are non-native. They can be divided into two groups, spring flowers and summer flowers. When the packing season begins on July 1st, both groups can be found at different elevations. Each wildflower family has distinct characteristics in the shape and structure of their petals and leaves. Some flowers are funnel-shaped, while others are shaped like trumpets or bells. Some stems bear opposite leaves, while others have alternate leaves. The colors of Rocky Mountain wildflowers also come in a rainbow of colors, from bright yellows to deep reds to vibrant purples. Aquatic grasses and plants can be found in the marshland and aquatic communities at lower elevations. Yellow monkey flower and algae flourish in the geothermal community. The northern desert area near Mammoth Hot Springs is hospitable to grasses, sagebrush, and Rocky Mountain juniper. Wildflowers grow mainly in the northern grasslands, where it is relatively dry and warm. The mixed forests area, with its communities of Douglas fir, aspen, berry bushes, and shrubs, begins at about 1,800 meters. Higher up, at about 2,300 meters, the forests are dominated by lodgepole pine. Above 2,500 meters, the vegetation community includes spruce, fir, lodgepole pine, subalpine fir, and Engelmann spruce. The timberline lies at about 3,000 meters, above which no trees will grow. Yellowstone National Park was inscribed on UNESCO's World Heritage List in 1978 and on the list of World Heritage in Danger in 1995.